The Pacific was quiet, a vast black mirror stretching into the horizon as a soft swell rolled beneath the hull. The only sounds were the hum of electronics and the distant throb of diesel engines pushing the Sagundu through the darkness at 12 knots. 13 days had passed since Japan announced its surrender. The war was officially over, and American sailors were already dreaming of home, of dry land, real food, and the simple silence of a world without battle alarms. But that night, peace was shattered by a call from the radar operator. A contact bearing 045°, range 12,000 yards. Lieutenant Commander Johnson leaned over the screen and felt his stomach tighten. The contact made no sense. It moved like a submarine, but the radar return was too large for any submarine that should exist. Much too large. The blip on the screen suggested a vessel the size of a destroyer. Yet there were no escorts, no formation, no signals. Just one solitary giant in the empty Pacific. Johnson had spent the war hunting Japanese submarines. He knew every signature they produced. Nothing in the Imperial Navy displaced more than 2,500 tons submerged. But this contact, it suggested something twice that size. Something beyond any intelligence report. Something that should not exist at all. He ordered his crew to battle stations. The Sagundu was a Balao-class submarine, 311 feet long and displacing 2,400 tons submerged. One of the most advanced submarines the United States had put to sea. But as she closed in on the mysterious contact, Johnson realized he was approaching something that dwarfed his own vessel. The shape that emerged from the darkness was not a destroyer. It was a submarine, longer, wider, bulkier, and utterly alien compared to anything the Americans had ever seen. A metal titan surfacing from the void. What Johnson encountered that night would remain classified for decades. The vessel carried technology American engineers had never imagined, engineering solutions beyond anything found in U.S. or German submarines. It represented a weapon system so advanced that the United States would ultimately choose to sink it rather than let another nation, especially the Soviet Union, lay eyes on its secrets. This is the story of the largest submarine of the Second World War. A vessel built to strike the American mainland from the sea. A weapon that came within hours of changing the course of history. The idea began in the mind of one man just 3 weeks after Pearl Harbor. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto was 57 years old in January 1942. He had lost 2 fingers at the Battle of Tsushima in 1905, and scars from shrapnel crisscrossed his abdomen. His walk carried the stiffness of a man who understood war not from books but from personal wounds. Yamamoto, architect of the December 7th attack on Pearl Harbor, had planned the operation with mathematical precision. He had watched the reports roll in as American battleships burned at their moorings. But even in that moment of triumph, he knew something his fellow officers did not. From 1919 to 1921, Yamamoto had studied at Harvard University. He spoke English, played poker with Americans, and traveled across the United States. He had walked through American factories, industrial giants capable of producing automobiles, appliances, and machinery on a scale Japan could never match. Yamamoto understood the cold truth. Japan had awakened a sleeping giant. As Japanese forces swept across Southeast Asia and the Pacific in early 1942, Yamamoto studied production reports and calculated logistics the way a gambler studies odds. America had lost battleships, yes. But American shipyards were already laying keels for new ones. By 1943, the United States would be producing aircraft carriers faster than Japan could sink them. By 1944, American air power would dominate the Pacific. And by 1945, Japan would face annihilation. If Japan was to have any chance of negotiating peace on favorable terms, Yamamoto needed a weapon that could strike America before the industrial tide became overwhelming. Not aircraft carriers. Japan couldn't replace them fast enough. Not battleships. Too vulnerable, too expensive, too slow. He needed something unexpected. Something that America could not anticipate or counter. Submarines. But not ordinary submarines. Yamamoto envisioned underwater aircraft carriers, vessels so large they could cross any ocean on Earth, surface off the coast of New York or San Francisco, launch bombers, and slip away beneath the waves. On January 13, 1942, Yamamoto submitted his proposal. He requested 18 massive submarines, each capable of carrying multiple attack aircraft. Each with the range to circle the globe 1.5 times without refueling. Each able to remain at sea for 4 months. The proposal was unprecedented. America's largest submarines displaced 2,400 tons. Yamamoto wanted vessels over 6,000 tons, nearly triple the size. The technology didn't exist. The engineering challenges were immense. But Japan was desperate, and desperation breeds ambition. Captain Kamito Kurashima led the feasibility study. Known as eccentric but brilliant, his insights had earned Yamamoto's trust. By March 1942, the general design plans were complete. The submarines would be 400 feet long, longer than modern nuclear submarines, 39 feet wide. A draft of 23 feet. They would displace 5,900 tons surfaced and over 6,500 submerged. The engineering solution to support the massive hangar was revolutionary. A double hull configuration with 2 parallel pressure cylinders joined in a figure-8 cross-section. No submarine in the world had ever used this design. It provided the strength needed to carry an enormous hangar atop the hull. This innovation would influence submarine design for decades. The hangar was the heart of the vessel. A 115-foot-long, 11-foot-wide cylinder sealed with a 2-inch rubber gasket. It could withstand pressures at 330 feet below the surface. Inside, 3 attack aircraft waited, folded like mechanical origami, ready to be assembled and launched in minutes. 4 massive diesel engines provided 9,000 horsepower and pushed the submarine at nearly 19 knots on the surface, faster than many destroyers. Underwater, electric motors drove the vessel at 6.5 knots. Fuel tanks allowed the submarine to travel 37,500 nautical miles, enough to encircle the planet. The aircraft themselves required a new design. Aichi Aircraft Company accepted the challenge in May 1942. The specifications bordered on fantasy. The plane had to fit inside an 11-foot-wide cylinder, carry heavy ordnance, fly fast enough to evade fighters, and land on water for recovery. The resulting aircraft, the M6A1 Seiran, Mountain Haze, was a masterpiece. A 2-seat monoplane powered by a 1,400 horsepower engine, capable of carrying an 1,800-pound bomb or a torpedo. Wings and tail folded to reduce its size. A fluorescent paint system allowed crews to assemble it in darkness. A special oil preheating system let the plane launch at full power without warming up, a crucial advantage when every second on the surface invited death. 3 planes could be launched within 45 minutes. Construction on the first submarine, the I-400, began in January 1943 at the Kure Naval Arsenal. The vessel was so massive that new cranes had to be built just to assemble it. But Japan's industrial situation was deteriorating. Steel shortages plagued the project. Air raids disrupted production. Children as young as 12 were put to work riveting and sorting parts. Earthquakes and bombings slowed aircraft production. Yamamoto's dream of 18 submarines shrank to 9, then to 5, and finally only 3 were completed before the war ended. Yamamoto never lived to see them. In April 1943, American codebreakers intercepted his flight itinerary. A squadron of P-38 Lightnings shot down his aircraft during a precision interception in the Solomon Islands. The mastermind behind the I-400 program died still strapped into his seat, gripping his samurai sword. But the program continued, driven by momentum and desperation. The I-400 was commissioned on December 30, 1944. Commander Toshio Kosaka took command of the floating fortress. Inside, 144 men lived in conditions that tested endurance and sanity. 8 forward torpedo tubes, a deck gun, triple-mounted anti-aircraft guns, radar, sonar-absorbing coatings, and a snorkel system more advanced than anything the Germans had produced. But the submarine also had flaws. The massive hangar made the vessel slow to dive, 56 seconds, nearly twice the time of American submarines. The offset conning tower forced constant steering adjustments underwater. It was difficult to maneuver and poorly suited for typical submarine combat. But it wasn't built for underwater duels. It was built to deliver aircraft. And the target for those aircraft was one of the most strategically important structures in the world, the Panama Canal. Destroying the Panama Canal would cripple American logistics. Without it, ships traveling between the Atlantic and Pacific would have to sail around South America, adding thousands of miles and weeks to every journey. Japan found blueprints of the canal through a Japanese engineer who had worked there before the war. The plan depended on precision. 10 aircraft launched from 4 submarines would fly across Colombia to the Caribbean side and bomb the Gatun locks at dawn. If the lock gates failed, Gatun Lake, an entire artificial sea, would drain into the ocean, rendering the canal unusable for months. Training began in June 1945. Pilots practiced night launches, torpedo drops, and rapid assembly of their aircraft on a full-scale wooden mock-up of the Gatun locks. But torpedo attacks proved too difficult, so the plan shifted to bombing runs. Catapult launches were dangerous in rough seas. One aircraft disappeared during training, its crew later washing ashore. By late June, training was complete. The submarines were ready. Then Okinawa fell. The invasion of the Japanese home islands was imminent. Destroying the canal would no longer matter. The operation was cancelled. Instead, the submarines received a new mission, a kamikaze strike on Ulithi Atoll, where dozens of American aircraft carriers were anchored. The mission was suicide. On July 23, 1945, the I-400 and I-401 set sail. Their voyage was plagued by friendly fire, storms, electrical fires, and near-miss encounters with American convoys. Then the atomic bombs fell. Hiroshima, Nagasaki. Japan surrendered. Conflicting orders left the submarine crews confused. Some messages urged them to fight on. Others demanded surrender. But finally, the mission was cancelled for good. On August 22, the crews of the I-400 and I-401 assembled their aircraft on deck. They launched them unmanned into the sea rather than let them fall into American hands. Torpedoes were fired without warheads. Bombs thrown overboard. Codes burned. The submarines raised black flags. When American destroyers intercepted the I-400, their crews stared in disbelief at the steel behemoth rising from the waves. No American intelligence report had prepared them for this. Prize crews boarded the submarines. Even experienced submarine officers were astonished by the engineering marvels inside. The double-hull design, advanced snorkel, massive hangar, and sonar-absorbing coating represented decades of potential technological leaps. 2 days later, Lieutenant Commander Johnson and the Sagundu encountered the I-401. Captain Arasumi, commander of the submarine division, refused to surrender. When the Americans boarded, He retreated to his cabin, placed a pistol in his mouth, and ended his life rather than face prosecution for war crimes. His men quietly wrapped his body in a flag and slipped it out a hatch. When American flags were raised over the captured submarines on August 31, 1945, the largest submarines ever built had surrendered without firing a single shot. The United States studied them intensely. Every system photographed. Every mechanism examined. But one problem remained. Under the terms of Allied agreements, the Soviet Union was entitled to examine captured Japanese equipment. America could not allow that. The Cold War was beginning. So the decision was made: when the studies were complete, the submarines would be destroyed. In 1946, the I-400, I-401, and I-14 were towed to deep water near Hawaii. Torpedoes fired. Explosions echoed across the ocean. The giants slipped beneath the waves and disappeared into the darkness, their secrets safe from Soviet eyes. For nearly 70 years, they remained lost, until 2013, when the Hawaii Undersea Research Laboratory located the remains of the I-400 deep off the coast of Oahu. The wreck lay in silence, its hangar collapsed but unmistakable, the enormous shape still awe-inspiring even in ruin. The discovery was announced after coordination with the United States and Japan. The submarine's bell was recovered in 2016 and now rests at the Pearl Harbor Submarine Museum. A single surviving Seiran aircraft is on display at the Smithsonian, a relic of a weapon meant to bring war to American shores. The I-400 class never struck the Panama Canal. They never attacked Ulithi. They never launched a single aircraft in combat. But their legacy reshaped the future. Submarine-launched aircraft evolved into submarine-launched ballistic missiles, the foundation of nuclear deterrence. The double-hull design influenced later submarine construction. Their engineering lessons echoed through decades of undersea warfare. Admiral Yamamoto died before his vision was realized. Captain Arisumi chose death rather than judgment. The pilots who trained for one-way missions returned home to families who never learned how close they came to sacrificing everything. And the I-400 now rests on the ocean floor, 1,800 feet below the surface. A symbol of ambition, desperation, and the secrets that the sea keeps. If this story moved you as much as it did us, please take a moment to like this video. It helps us bring more forgotten stories of the Second World War to light. Subscribe to stay connected as we continue exploring the hidden corners of history. And tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Our community stretches from Texas to Tasmania, from veterans to students, from casual listeners to lifelong enthusiasts. Thank you for watching, and thank you for helping keep these stories alive.